Okay, you aimless, ridiculous idiot sheep. I'm going to now try to knock some sense into 2 or 3 of your heads. Probably unsuccessfully, but... So, I subscribe to Mark Passio just because I happen to agree with his thesis on how the vast majority of the human race are completely unaware of their own psychology, but they're being controlled by a dark occult class, that a dark priest class that knows their psychology very well and uses it to manipulate them constantly. And that part of his thesis is something that I agree with, and I like the way he's articulated it in the past. So I subscribe to him to listen to a lot of his stuff, but I've recently figured out that, like everyone that's allowed on YouTube that isn't censored, who's promoted and who has, thousands of subscribers, he's 80% truth, 20% lie, shill, basically, for sure. So, because, and here's why. He rails about free speech, and he also rails about personal responsibility, and this secret, or, no, he says that there's a real law of attraction, and that you have to create a thought first, and then from your thoughts come actions, and that everybody is personally responsible, therefore, for everything that happens to them. So, so let's do this. Let's attack this personal responsibility myth that has been, the cornerstone of the dark occult class that he rails against. It's like, we can fuck you and fuck you and fuck you and fuck you, and create a monetary system that slowly, incrementally devalues all of your labor. And then, if you complain about it, you're a millennial snowflake social justice warrior that has a outlandish sense of entitlement. And then on the other hand, if you don't object, then you're giving your implicit consent, and therefore you deserve everything you get because you didn't object. So if you do object, you're a snowflake. If you don't object, you're a moron because you're giving your implicit consent. So, and anything in between, is, that's obviously, So taking personal responsibility is what, that was the Horatio Alger, the Rudyard Kipling, Manifest Destiny, that whole doctrine of now what is considered supposedly conservative doctrine of taking pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and, and conquering the odds and being a survivor. Okay, that's good. That's a value. Okay, everybody knows that not being a lazy bastard is a good thing. So, you shouldn't have a sense of entitlement if you sit around and watch soap operas all day, and going from man to man, and having kids with 14 different guys, and having the state pay all your bills, and and you don't do a fucking lick of work for the rest of for your entire life. And you expect something, then you have a sense of entitlement. But if you're a grown man and you work your fucking ass off, and you wake up one day and you realize that the banks, what was this saying, that if the banks that grow up around, they're going to deprive people of liberty until their fathers grow up, their sons grow up and are homeless, and the blah 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 that they created or something. I think it was Woodrow. I don't know who made that quote about the banks. If we allow a central bank, then they're going to deprive everybody of their liberty. I think it was the Lindberghs, one of the Lucky Lindy, one of the Lindberghs said that. If we allow the private banks to grow up, the private banks will grow up around us and deprive us of all of our liberties, and our sons will wake up homeless in the country that we built, or something like that. Yeah. So if you complain about the fact that you're going to wake up homeless as a grown man who works his ass off because the Federal Reserve undervalued your money supply by printing way too much money, then you're an entitled social justice warrior snowflake. And even though by objecting, you're not giving your consent. You're withdrawing your consent from their black occult matrix. You are now, if you don't consent and you withdraw your consent, you're a snowflake social justice warrior, millennial entitled scumbag. that's obviously a socialist pig. And if you do consent, you're a dumb sheep monkey that deserves everything they get. So I guess really you either can consent or you can't consent, and either way you're fucked in America. And you have to take personal responsibility for that. You have to take personal responsibility for either consenting or not consenting. And if you do consent, you're a dumb monkey, and if you don't consent, you're a social justice warrior, snowflake, millennial, entitled scumbag. So there's the doctrine of personal responsibility thrown right back in that fucking moron's face, because that's obviously not true. Because, like, here's another thing. Like, if someone kicks my door in and fucking rapes my wife and kills my children and rapes my dog and burns my house down because they kick my door in and do a home invasion with a shotgun, then I get, under Mark Passio's thesis, it's my responsibility, because I didn't kill myself when I was born. I didn't commit suicide as a baby, so everything that happened to me after that point is my fault. Even if someone, like, if some guy, like, swerves his car over deliberately and kills me in a head-on collision, it's my fault. If someone comes up to me and bashes my face in with a baseball bat on the street, it's my fault, because I didn't kill myself before that. So that's why when criminals go into courts and stuff, in all common law and history, if you, like, went and bashed someone's brains in with a baseball bat, then they'd put they'd put the person who had their brains bashed in with a baseball bat in jail, because it's obviously his personal responsibility that he got his face bashed in with a baseball bat. And the guy with the baseball bat, since he's not injured, didn't sustain an injury, therefore nothing is his fault, because he just has to take personal responsibility for not having been injured, which is, there's no responsibility at all, because you have to take personal responsibility for everything that happens to you, right? And he made that happen to somebody else. So it didn't happen to him. That's why he doesn't have to take personal responsibility for it. But you have to take personal responsibility for everything that happens to you, because everything that happens to you is your responsibility. Everything that happens to you. So, like, if a bunch of witches get together and like, put you in a pentagram and like, circle around you, gang stalkers, and they circle around you and ruin your life and just tell lies about you, or a bunch of FBI agents, like start infiltrating your life, and like, they put some scarlet woman in your life that can, like, wheedle her way into your fucking home and be your girlfriend for a couple months, so she can, plant bugs all over your house and then slander your name all over town and all over Facebook and stuff like that, or whatever. That's your personal responsibility, because obviously you didn't kill all of the FBI and kill that woman to prevent them from doing that to you. So it's and you let her in your house, and you let the FBI gang stalk you and do their COINTELPRO stuff on you. So obviously that's your personal responsibility. Like all of the Vietnamese people that were killed and brutalized in Vietnam, their responsibility. They thought about that in their mind, and then it happened to them. All of the people that died in the Holocaust, few of which were Jews. The 3 Jews that actually died in the Holocaust, and then the thousands of Catholics, and the thousands of mentally ill people, and the thousands of drug addicts, and the thousands of alcoholics, and the thousands of homosexuals, and all of the people that they categorized with the IBM punch card machines in the Holocaust, in the labor camps in Germany and elsewhere in World War II. Yeah, all of those people, the reason why they got rounded up and put in there is because they weren't part of the National Socialist awesomeness that Mark Passio loves so much, because obviously he loves the National Socialist Nazis, because anyone who didn't go along with them and ended up in a prison camp has to take personal responsibility for the fact that they ended up in a prison camp. If they take personal responsibility, then they wouldn't have, if they had done, the appropriate preventative measures, they wouldn't have been taken by force and put into a prison camp. So they have to take personal responsibility for that. There are no victims, people. There are no victims. If you believe there are victims, you're garbage, little boy. You're garbage. If you believe that someone can be victimized in this world, and that there are situations in which the responsibility lies on the aggressor, Which is obviously the case. And Mark Passio, on one hand, talks about natural law and stealing things from people and depriving people of property, and that's and how every single form of crime is actually some form of depriving someone of their or stealing something from someone, like whether it's their life or their privacy or their happiness or whatever it is, their contentedness in the moment. You're disturbing somebody or stealing something from somebody in some way, and that's a crime. Yeah. Which is agreeable, right? That's pretty much that. But then you talk about in the same fucking breath, the scumbag will talk about how the irresponsible scumbag spreading his propaganda through his free speech and deceiving thousands and thousands of people as the cult leader that he is, the anarchist cult leader that he is, deceiving people and telling them that you have to take personal responsibility when things are stolen from you, so that you can never be a victim. You're never a victim. So if someone kicks in your door and steals your wife and bashes your fucking brains in and kills your children, you have to take personal responsibility for that. It's not the robber's fault. It's not the burglar's fault. Yeah. And then now let's go on to the free speech thing. Of course, there are like 9 known exceptions in the common law to free speech, or like the current like Supreme Court law, which is based a lot on common law. Slander and libel is obviously not free speech. True threats are not free speech. Incitement is not free speech. Intellectual property theft, not free speech. There are, I'm not going to name them all, but I've seen them all plenty of times. I'm not going to name them all, but there are definite exceptions and legitimate exceptions to free speech. So when you talk about, people get on YouTube and talk about how entitled millennial fucking snowflakes like Mark Passio get on YouTube and talk about how Facebook and YouTube are violating free speech, but Facebook and YouTube are actually private corporations. You fucking moron. And by signing their end user agreement, when you fucking make an account, somewhere in there it says that you don't have a right to fucking, that there are community guidelines, and they can fucking basically tell you what those community guidelines are, and they can terminate your account anytime they want. And you say okay by signing, and you consent to sign the agreement. So it's not free. You don't have some fucking some spiritual universal natural law free speech in that sense when you sign up for Facebook or YouTube, because you're dealing with a private corporation who's giving you a free account, and you're agreeing to take their account for free and use their platform that they created with their resources and their property. And then you're complaining like a snowflake that they fucking shut your channel down. So make your own fucking YouTube channel. Make your own fucking website and create your own fucking video engine and your own fucking platform like DTube, or make your own website and create your own fucking videos somehow. Figure out how to format your own videos without embedding YouTube videos on your site if you can. If not, fuck you, because you're using YouTube to do it under your own very own super personal responsibility anarchist mentality. Don't complain about YouTube or Facebook because they're private corporations. Number 2, the United States government is a fucking private corporation. So, and the Constitution does not apply to anybody. So there is no such thing as free speech, actually. Even especially political speech is not free anymore, and it never was. So acting like it is a total fucking farce. If you say the wrong things and say them often enough, the fucking police, the FBI, the CIA will find you, and they will fucking stop you from saying it. Because they don't want certain things to get out. Because they spend hundreds of billions of dollars a year, trillions of dollars a year, lying to everybody. And they've spent hundreds of trillions, probably quadrillions of dollars in the past century lying to everybody. So they don't want someone coming and dispelling all of those lies with one fucking sentence. Quadrillions of dollars worth of fucking man hours and all this stuff going into all these lies, and someone just comes along and fucking spills the beans. No, they're not going to have that shit. So there's no such thing as free speech, you fucking scumbag. But I know that you say that anyone that wants to violate people's free speech is garbage. is garbage. You know, and you know, there are 9, and here's another thing. There are 9 known exceptions to free speech. Unfortunately, one of the conspicuous omissions in the very well-known and the very well-known list of exceptions to free speech, which are published all over the place, easy to find. They're very consistent. Okay, they're published everywhere. Okay. The one thing, couple things that are off that list. One of which is there are a couple things conspicuously left off that list. One of them is that there's no exception to free speech when it comes to a giant gang of fucking pigs, mafia fucking scumbags that own the entire world and that now have consolidated their power so that they own all of the media. Every single fucking thing that is said, spoken, uttered, written down, filmed, fucking portrayed in any way is owned by these fucking scumbags. And that is not an exception to free speech when it actually should be. Conspiratorial, mass, organized fucking lying to the point where it becomes fucking black sorcery should be an exception to free speech in an organized, civilized society. If you don't think that organized black sorcery by mafia force, by fucking deadly force, shouldn't be an exception to free speech, then you're a fucking scumbag. If you think that all of the news media and the different media and each medium that exists should be able to go on indefinitely because they're speaking, therefore they should be free, just by the pure, the sole, the sole, whatever you call it, sole virtue or the sole, just by the fact that they're speaking, then therefore they should be completely free. So the logic is that if you're speaking, ergo, you should not be stopped from speaking no matter what, because you're speaking. That's not what free speech means. Free speech refers to political speech when you're speaking against power that has usurped your ability to survive, or in some way, and you're objecting you're free to withdraw your consent from slavery, another thing that Mark Passio is constantly railing against, which is slavery. But apparently to him, you're not free to withdraw your consent from slavery. Only he can do that. But if you do it, you're a snowflake, and you're a socialist scumbag that's against free speech. But by the way, Mark Passio is a Satanist, and he is definitely involved in international child trafficking. And I would not trust him around children. I fucked his mother last week, and I can say all that because it's true and it's free speech. So because I'm not slandering him, I can say that, and it's free speech. So just so you know that, he's definitely still a Satanist. He never got out of it. He's definitely involved in international child trafficking, the production of child pornography, the consumption of child pornography, and he's definitely involved in. I also heard that he likes to dress up like a nun and have gay men dress up like priests and rape him in the asshole. That's another thing that he likes. Which is fine because it's free speech and he loves free speech, so it's okay that I say that. And he'd actually be he'd be like, hey man, great, here's another guy that gets it, he'd like that I said that, because he likes people that speak freely, because that's what free speech is, speaking freely, no matter what, no, but yeah, so. There you go. Personal responsibility and free speech. How you doing? So, two totally fallacious, dangerous concepts that have exceptions and that are not cut and dry and that are not black and white. You don't always have to take personal responsibility because, like, if you were as a baby, like, the devil, like, basically stole your soul and said, hey, little baby, do you want some breast milk? And you went, and then he took that as a yes, and then, therefore, by taking the breast milk, you sold your soul to the devil, then, which is basically what everyone's doing with their birth certificates and stuff, and their giving their mothers are giving their consent, and the babies are giving their implied consent when they register to vote in the corporation that is the United States of America. Yeah, that kind of baby Faust kind of deal that you make is, you're not personally responsible for that. You're a baby, and you need breast milk. So if the devil comes and tells you that, and stands between you and your mother and tells you that the only way you can suck on your mother's tits is that if you sell your soul, that if you promise me your soul, and the baby cries and doesn't even say yes, but the devil takes that as a yes, that's you don't have to take personal responsibility for that, okay? Because you're, number one, you're a baby, and number two, you cried and didn't say yes, and number three, you really wouldn't even know what yes meant at that point, or what the devil was. So yeah, you're not really personally responsible for that. There are levels of personal responsibility, and it's not like you are or you aren't. There's levels of culpability, and it's, there's all kinds of gray areas. It's not black and white. Let's get into a third thing that he loves to, that Mark Passio loves to talk about, which is anarchy and socialism. He's very, very much against socialism. We already talked about that a little bit. And socialism is he loves socialism because he knows that all the people that got put in prisons in the Holocaust that were rounded up by a socialist government should take personal responsibility by the fact that they were rounded up by a socialist government by the use of violence and coercion, which is what he loves, especially when it's a socialist government doing it. And therefore, if you're rounded up by a socialist government by coercion and violence, you should definitely take personal responsibility for having had that done to you. Another, so but seriously though, in his, while we all sit around and wait for his anarchic utopia to happen, he talks about socialism and like it's like this black and white thing. Like there's anarchy and there's socialism, and socialism is when the state has all means of production, and they control all means of production, right? And they own all property and control all means of production, and yeah. So yeah, and anarchy is when the state owns nothing and it's every man for himself, and there's no police and no laws and no government, and everyone basically is self-governing, which is supposed to be this utopia. And in which case, obviously, a group of conspirators would always emerge and keep telling everybody that there's a government, that they'd all meet in secret and start controlling things from behind the scenes anyway, and tell everybody that it was anarchy. But anyway, even in his anarchy, it would definitely degenerate quickly into like the Skull and Bones would definitely he's part of the OTO, so his OTO group would start meeting and controlling things from behind the scenes, and controlling production and controlling distribution, and just telling everyone that they were free. That he'd be pissing on everybody and telling them it was raining, and then while we sit around and wait for his anarchic utopia to happen, there are different forms of socialism that are actually happening on the planet today. And I'm not a socialist, and I don't agree with it necessarily, and I'm not sure what we should do about the current economic system. But I know that overt socialism seems to be at least if you know that you're in a socialist country, it's better than being in a country like America, where they keep telling you that it's capitalist and that you have to take personal responsibility for a bunch of people who are controlling you from cradle to grave, in which case you shouldn't have to take personal responsibility. You should actually have a divine excuse saying, well, this government has been coercing me by violence for my entire life, and therefore I really don't have to take personal responsibility for anything, because everything I've done is a result of being completely controlled from cradle to grave. So there's that socialism which we live in, where there's like our government owns each town, city, county, state, and the federal government own tons of investments in all kinds of commodities and stocks and bonds and things like that. And we live in a socialist country, but it's just covert socialism. It's in the guise of capitalism. So it's socialism where the people, the powers that be, don't have to take any responsibility for their actions. Because as far as they're telling us, we're the ones in control and we're the capitalists. And we just failed to go from rags to riches in their perfectly pure capitalist system where it's purely pure capitalism in the United States. And since we failed to be self-made, then we are lowly wretches that should take personal responsibility for being losers. Even though what's actually happening is that there's socialism for sure. Everything is fucking controlled on the entire planet. There's input and output analysis on the entire fucking planet. Definitely, constantly. And the economy and each individual is controlled beyond any fucking level that he can even conceive. Most of us, anyway. I can conceive of it, and some of us can conceive of it. Most people can't even fucking understand the beginning of how much they're being controlled. But that doesn't stop scumbags from talking about how, we're capitalist. But, so would you rather be in a country that is openly socialist, where the socialist controllers openly tell everybody that they're responsible for creating the economy and creating the value of the money and regulating everything, so that when the shit hits the fan, you can blame them? Or would you rather be in a situation where you're in a socialist situation, a totalitarian fascist situation like we are in America, where the controlling class gets to act like it's capitalist so that they never have to take responsibility when they fuck everything up every 10 years or 7 to 10 years and crash the economy on purpose? That kind of socialism, or totalitarian fascism is actually worse, I would say. But Mark Passio, being a shill, is trying to promote the idea that America isn't socialist yet, and that we're trying to hang on to our capitalist. The founding fathers promised us a free capitalist society, and that's what we still have. And these fucking scumbag millennials and Europeans are trying to make us socialists. And even though we're purely capitalist, pure capitalists, and we purely have all the opportunity in the world to go from rags to riches any day we want, and if everyone did that all in one day, we'd all be millionaires, and no one would be working anymore, which would mean the whole world would become overgrown with weeds and trees, and the cities would be overgrown because no one would be mowing any lawns or building any houses or repairing anything, because everyone would be millionaires making money off the stock market, being self-made, and no one would want to flip your burgers. No one would want to work at White Castle anymore. No one would even want to work at an organic grocery store. No one would want to do anything anymore except be a millionaire and not have to work. So, with Mark Passio and all the dumb fucking alt-right scumbags that are out there that are trying to, and I don't mean to pigeonhole Mark Passio as a right wing, because I don't think that I don't deal with right wing, left wing ever, but that seems to be the kind of angle he's taking, is that we're purely capitalist and purely responsible for our actions in a traditional conservative sense, or a modern conservative sense, I should say. And that, we have to, but it's totally not the case in America. If everyone became rich and did rags to riches and went from rags to riches tomorrow, then no one would be there to fucking bring your groceries in when you go to the grocery store. No one would be there when you went to pump gas. No one would be there every single person that you see at a cash register in every fucking store you go to, no one would be there to fucking sew your clothes. No one would be there to fucking make anything for you anymore, because no one would want to work if they were millionaires. They wouldn't be working in any lowly jobs that suck. And there's plenty of fucking lowly jobs in the United States that suck and that no one wants to do. And if everyone became a millionaire because they were all self-made, none of that would exist anymore. So our society totally 100% relies on people needing to do those jobs. Not wanting to, but needing to. And they set a system up where it's impossible to not have a certain amount of people that need to do shit jobs in order to survive. No one would be up fucking roofing in fucking Houston, Texas, up on a fucking roof when it's 105 degrees, putting on a fucking roof on a house, if they were millionaires, okay? So if everyone was a millionaire and everyone went from rags to riches in this supposed capitalist society, fucking society would turn into like I Am Legend. The fucking cities would be overgrown with trees. There would be trees growing out of the tops of buildings. So Everything would have dirt, a covering of dirt and grass all over it, and vines and weeds everywhere. And it would be all overgrown, like the fucking outskirts, like the Forbidden Zone in fucking Logan's Run. It would be completely fucking demolished and overgrown, because no one would work anymore, because they'd all be millionaires. So they've set up a system where there has to be people that don't want to do the jobs on the bottom, but need to, so that they can have a slave class. And that is called totalitarian fascism, not capitalism. And it's not even socialism. Because socialism is when control by an oligarchy is actually overt. It is spoken and out in the open. We're a controlling class, and we're organizing your resource distribution for you. That's overt socialism. Then there's covert totalitarian fascism, which is worse. So Mark Passio is a fucking scumbag. I didn't think so before, but now I do because of his last couple of videos. So fuck you, Mark.